Hello friends, very good evening, welcome to LTX classes. We know that there is an economic crisis happening in Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka is struggling to come out of it, and the people of Sri Lanka are struggling because of this crisis. In this video, let's look at why and what are the reasons for the economic crisis that's currently happening in Sri Lanka. Right. So I will begin with one beautiful concept called twin deficit problem. This is one of the major problems that Sri Lanka is facing today. What is this twin deficit problem? As the name suggests, twin deficit, which means deficit in two different areas. What are the two different areas? One is fiscal deficit, the other one is current account deficit. Current account deficit. So Sri Lanka is currently facing deficit in both these accounts. Let's try to understand both of them one by one. The first one is fiscal deficit. What is the meaning of fiscal deficit? Let's say there is a family. In this family, obviously family will have some amount of income. Income could come from salaries, or if they are owners of a company, through profits. And the family also spends money, which is called expenditure, right? So every family has both income as well as expenditure. If income is more than expenditure, you say the family is in surplus. It has excess cash. For example, if income is less than expenditure, which means if expenditure is more than income, we say the family is in deficit. Similarly, even the same holds true even for a country. Whenever a country's income is less than the expenditure, if the country's income is less than the expenditure, we say the country is in fiscal deficit. Right? Country is in fiscal deficit. From where a country gets its income? Predominantly via taxes. Right? Taxes is one avenue. They also get income from parks, museums, and different things that they maintain. And whenever we visit a park, whenever we visit a museum, we pay some fee. Even that fee is also part of government's income. There are many other avenues which contribute to government's income. Even when you come to expenditure, government spends a lot of money on welfare initiatives. Government also spends a lot of money on infrastructure and other developmental initiatives. Whenever the expenditure is more than income, we say the country is in deficit. We say the country has fiscal deficit. So what happens when our family is in deficit? We go for debt, right? We take money from our neighbors or from banks. Similarly, whenever a country has deficit, the country also goes for debt. Remember this, the country also goes for debt. Keep this in mind. Now let's come to the second one, current account deficit. What is this current account? We need to understand this before we get into deficit in current accounts. So when I am talking about current account, I am referring to the country's interactions with external world or rest of the world. So let's say this is Sri Lanka and this is rest of the world. From Sri Lanka, we have both exports as well as imports. We have both exports as well as imports from the rest of the world, right? Let's look at this particular aspect in a detailed manner. Let's look at this particular aspect, how exports and imports happen and how it might lead to deficit. Let's look at that aspect right now. Now let's look at, this is Sri Lanka and this is rest of the world, and we are looking at certain transactions between Sri Lanka and rest of the world. You know Sri Lanka's tea is famous. So let's assume Sri Lanka is exporting tea to the rest of the world. So whenever Sri Lanka is exporting tea to the rest of the world, it is exporting tea, right? Whenever it exports, it receives money. Yes or no? Whenever you export a good, you get money, right? Yes. Dollars are coming in. The money is flowing in. So exports are positive for the country because the foreign currency is flowing into the country. Now let's take the example of oil. If you take the example of oil, Sri Lanka doesn't have oil, so it imports oil. It imports oil. Whenever Sri Lanka imports oil, it has to pay for it. Without paying, how will you import oil? You need to pay for it, right? Yes, you need to pay money again to rest of the world, which means you have to spend dollars. The dollars are going out of the country. Whenever exports are happening, money is flowing in, foreign currency is flowing in. Whenever Sri Lanka is importing, foreign currency is going out, right? So exports and imports can happen for both goods as well as services. Just keep it in mind. Exports and imports can happen for both goods and services. When we are talking about goods, we call it merchandise trade. Just remember this, merchandise trade, right? When exports of goods is less than imports, what happens? Tell me. Exports means money coming in, imports means money going out. So money going out is more than money coming in. It leads to deficit. What deficit? Merchandise trade deficit. It leads to merchandise trade deficit. Remember, this merchandise trade is part of your current account. It is part of your current account. Keep it in mind. So it leads to deficit. Coming to services, you know Sri Lanka is famous for tourism. So tourism comes under services. Generally, people from all over the world visit Sri Lanka, which means Sri Lanka is exporting tourism services. So foreign people are coming to Sri Lanka. If they are coming to Sri Lanka, if they have to come and visit different tourist spots in Sri Lanka, they will need to buy Lankan rupees. So they have to give their dollars to Sri Lankan Central Bank of Sri Lanka. They have to come and give their dollars to Sri Lankan Central Bank and then take these Lankan rupees from them. Which means whenever people come to Sri Lanka for tourism purpose, what happens? Your dollars are coming in. It is a positive sign. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, remember this, because of COVID-19, tourism industry took a hit, which means not many people are coming to Sri Lanka now. Especially in 2020 and 2021, people stopped visiting Sri Lanka. Not just Sri Lanka, many tourist countries, many countries which are famous for tourism got hit because people stopped traveling, which means this money which was coming into Sri Lanka is now not coming. Otherwise, generally, services will be positive. Because of this tourism, Sri Lanka will have a lot of foreign currency. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, tourism got hit and Sri Lanka's foreign currency reserves have gone down further. Keep this in mind. I will give you some perspective. See, look at this. Let's say this is Sri Lankan Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Whenever someone wants to come to Sri Lanka, what will he do? He will give his dollars to Sri Lankan Central Bank and takes Lankan rupees. So this way, Sri Lanka's central bank's foreign currency reserves will go up. Whenever there is an export transaction, what happens? A Sri Lankan trader sells his goods to other countries. and he receives money from them in dollars because he is selling it to other countries, and he gives these dollars to Sri Lankan central bank and takes Lankan rupees from the central bank. Again, the foreign currency reserves will go up. Are you getting it? Because of exports, because of these tourism activities, foreign currency reserves will generally go up. But in case of imports, what happens? If a Sri Lankan trader or a merchant needs goods from rest of the world, for that he needs to pay in dollars. What will he do? He goes to Sri Lankan central bank, he gives his Lankan rupees, and he buys these dollars from Sri Lankan central bank, which means it leads to reduction in the foreign currency reserves. That means whenever you are importing goods, you need to pay in dollars, but the Sri Lankan trader or the Sri Lankan businessman doesn't have dollars. He goes to central bank, he takes those dollars from them and gives his rupees. So import transactions, dollars are going down with the central bank. Export transactions, dollars are going up in the central bank. Unfortunately, for the last years, what happened in Sri Lanka? These import transactions were much more than these export transactions, because of which Sri Lankan central bank's foreign exchange reserves have gone down, which also have led to current account deficit. In current account, the money that is flowing out is more than the money that is coming in, because of which it led to a reduction in the foreign exchange reserves of Sri Lankan central bank. Remember this. Now we have looked at two deficits. One is fiscal deficit, the other one is current account deficit. Both the deficits, I told you, whenever you have a deficit, what will you do? You will go for debt. Right? So remember this debt thing in your mind. So before we move further, I will tell you two more reasons or two more decisions by the government of Sri Lanka which backfired. There are two decisions which backfired. One is election promises. What is that election promise? Mahindra Rajapaksa, during his election promise, he promised to reduce taxes. If you are voting me to power, I will reduce your taxes. This is what he promised in the elections, and he won, and he actually reduced taxes. When you reduce taxes, what will happen? Your income will go down. When your income goes down and your expenditure is more than income, obviously it leads to fiscal deficit. So one of the reasons for fiscal deficit is this reduction of taxes or reduction of income because of that. Second reason which completely backfired, which is a wrong decision by the government, is organic farming. They tried to go for complete organic farming in Sri Lanka. Right? Organic farming might be a good idea, but they went big bang. They wanted to change entire agriculture into organic altogether at once. So they banned chemical fertilizers. Altogether. All the farmers of Sri Lanka were forced to go for organic farming. When they went for organic farming, initially you all know the yield went down. The yield of the farming went down, which means scarcity of food. Food scarcity. Not enough food was produced in Sri Lanka, which means they had to import food. They had to import food because they were not able to produce enough food within the country. They had to import food. Again, import bill has gone up. When your import bill goes down, again your dollars will go down. Import bill goes up, dollars will go down. We have already discussed this. right? So organic farming is one bad decision which was not implemented in a proper manner. Election promises, again another issue, because they promised to reduce taxes and they implemented it, but unfortunately because of which the income of the country went down drastically. So these are some economic mismanagement, right? This is economic mismanagement by the government of the day. So because of all the reasons, because of all these reasons, Sri Lanka needed to have a lot of debt. They did not have enough money. They were forced to take a lot of debt. Unfortunately, here comes another scenario. Right? Internationally, you have something called a credit rating agency. Credit rating agencies like Moody's or Fitch, etc. What do these credit rating agencies do? These credit rating agencies rate countries. They rate countries. They give rating to countries. So I'll give you a small household example, then I'll come to the country's example. Let's say in a village there is a money lender. There is a money lender and two people approach the money lender for debt, for money. So first one is a government teacher, second one is a daily laborer. So government teacher and daily laborer approached the money lender for money. Now you think and you tell me, this money lender, whom would he prefer to give his money? Right? He would prefer to give his money to government teacher because he has stable income. He has stable income. So the possibility of repayment is very high. The possibility of repayment is very high. But when you come to this daily laborer, he doesn't have stable income. The possibility of repayment is very less. So from the point of view of money lender, who among these two, government teacher or daily laborer, will have better credit rating? Who will have better credit rating? Obviously the answer is government teacher. Right? Similarly, if someone wants to invest their money, if someone wants to lend their money to anyone, they look at this credit rating. How will you decide credit rating? Based on the existing debt. What is the amount of debt they have today? Based on their income profile. What is the kind of income they have? Based on fiscal management or fiscal prudence. What kind of discipline the country has with respect to spending money. They look at all these parameters and then give rating. So similarly, these credit rating agencies looked at Sri Lanka and identified that they have this twin deficit problem, which means they have fiscal deficit, they also have current account deficit. They already had lot of debt. Their imports are rising every day, their exports are falling day by day, which means their forex reserves, their foreign exchange reserves are almost empty now. By looking at all these parameters, these credit rating agencies, what did they do? They downgraded Sri Lanka. They downgraded Sri Lanka, which means they have reduced their rating for Sri Lanka. What happens whenever someone reduces your rating? Which means no new investor will come in or no new person will come and give you debt. No person will come and give you loan. Okay, keep this credit rating agency thing in mind. I'll give you one more concept and close this. Right. Whenever a country needs money, look at this. Whenever a country needs money, what do? They go for debt. They either increase taxes and raise their income, or they can also go for debt. So when they go for debt, they issue something called bonds. Bond is nothing but a financial instrument which has three things. First one is face value. Second one is coupon rate or the interest rate that they are willing to pay. Third one is maturity. For example, let's say Sri Lanka is issuing a bond for 10,000 Lankan rupees and they are promising 8% interest rate and they are giving it with a maturity of 5 years, which means if you are an investor, if you are buying this bond issued by the Sri Lankan government, you have to pay 10,000 for one bond if you are paying 10,000 every year, you get 8%, which means 800 rupees as interest per year, and after 5 years you get your money back, which means after 5 years you will get your 10,000 plus 5 instances of 800 rupees, which you get every year. This is what you will get at the end of 5 years, right? An investor gets interest income, right? So whenever a country issues bonds, several people will show interest, they come and buy those bonds. But today Sri Lanka needs dollars, not rupees. So if they want money, they have to issue dollar denominated bonds, not Lankan rupee denominated bonds. They have to issue bonds to foreign investors, not Lankan investors. When they are issuing bonds to foreign investors, what will happen? Foreign investors will have to buy it. But these foreign investors, what do they look at? They look at credit rating. Credit rating of Sri Lanka is bad. When credit rating of Sri Lanka is bad, they were not showing interest in buying the bonds issued by Sri Lanka, which means Sri Lanka is unable to get debt, it is unable to get money, it is unable to get foreign currency, it is unable to get foreign currency. This is the situation that the Sri Lanka is in today, because they do not have money, because they are unable to get fresh loans or fresh debt. Sri Lanka had to default on repayment of existing loans. They had already taken certain loans from different countries, right? Now they were not able to service the debt, they were not able to pay the interest, because when you are taking these loans from external countries or international organizations like IMF and World Bank and other banks, you have to pay in dollars, you have to pay in foreign currency. But unfortunately Sri Lanka doesn't have enough foreign currency. When they don't have enough foreign currency, what happens? They could not pay it, which means they have defaulted. So their credit rating went down further. Now nobody will come and buy a Sri Lankan issued bond. Nobody will come and buy Sri Lankan issued bond. I think some of you might be thinking, why not print currency? If they don't have money, why not print currency? This could be something you might be having. If Sri Lanka wants a lot of dollars, Sri Lanka could simply print currency, which is Lankan rupees, and exchange it with dollars. That's what you might be thinking, right? They don't do it, because whenever you do this, it leads to a lot of inflation and devaluation of your currency. Devaluation means your own currency will lose its value. If you are printing a lot of money and pumping it in the system, money supply will go up. Money supply will go up. When the money supply goes up, what happens? The money loses its value. I'll give you one example. You will understand what I am trying to say. Let's say in an economy there are certain number of goods and services. For example, some cars, some motorcycles, some things. So an economy produces certain number of goods and services. Obviously these are unlimited? No, they are limited. They are limited by the production capacity. They are also limited by the demand. Right. Let's assume a certain amount of money is there in the system. All people of Sri Lanka have a certain amount of their money. I am giving Indian rupee notation, don't worry about it. So they have a certain amount of money. With this money, they try to buy these goods and services. So this is called your demand. So your money supply, demand, and here you have supply of goods and services. Let's assume if this money supply goes up multiple times, if the government starts printing money and this money supply goes up, now what happens? More people have cash with them. Unfortunately, the goods and services produced by the country remain same. There is not much change in the goods and services, because it is not possible to It is not possible to instantly increase your production. It is quite not quite possible. So when more money is chasing fewer amount of goods and services, what will happen? The demand for each good and service will go up. When it goes up, obviously it leads to rise in prices. It leads to rise in prices, which is called inflation. For example, an egg which was previously sold at 5 rupees per piece per egg, let's say if it is being sold at 10 rupees per egg, the price of the egg goes up from 5 rupees to 10 rupees. What happens to 100 rupees of currency? This 100 rupees of currency earlier used to buy 20 eggs, because 20 into 5 equal to 100. Now the same 100 rupees is able to buy only 10 eggs, because the price of egg has gone up. Now you tell me, the value of this currency, something which used to buy 20 eggs earlier, is only able to buy 10 eggs now, which means its purchasing power has gone down. Its power to purchase has gone down. You can also call it the value has gone down. The currency will lose its value, because of which countries don't print currency unnecessarily. If the price goes down, if the currency is devalued, if the currency loses value, the prices of all goods and services go up, and common man will find it very difficult to buy them, because of which countries generally they don't print currency, which is not a good idea at all. Countries like Zimbabwe, Venezuela, they suffered a lot because of this indiscriminate printing of currency. I hope you have understood the entire concept or entire things that transpired in Sri Lanka. So quick revision. First one, twin deficit problem. Fiscal deficit, current account deficit. Second one, COVID-19 has created another issue, because of which tourism revenue has gone down. Organic farming was a bad decision by the government, because of which food scarcity happened. In Sri Lanka. So scarcity of food, so they needed to import food. Election promises was another bad decision by Sri Lanka. As per election promises, they decided to reduce taxes, so because of which their income went down. So many issues, all these things put together put the economy in crisis. So their economy is now in crisis. Because of all these things, what happened? Their credit rating has gone down. When the credit rating went down, new debt was difficult to come by. People were not ready to buy Sri Lankan bonds. Right? This is the situation that Sri Lanka is currently facing. The economy is in crisis. I hope I have made it easier for you to understand. Take care. Bye-bye.